Hi, everyone, and welcome to Fresh from the Studio. This is an opportunity for women in their work, member artists, to share their work with you. Each artist will have 10 minutes to present upcoming work, work that they've worked on for several years, give us some background into their process. And after the four presentations, you'll have the opportunity to ask them questions and make comments. Our artists today are Ahn Hee Strain, Amanda Witucki, Alicia Philley, and Rosibel Ramirez. We'll start today with Ahn Hee.
Are we good? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it looks great.
Awesome. My name is Ahn Hee Strain. I am the founder of Artful Peaks, and I'm a newly founded full-time artist here in Austin. Upcoming topics for you are going to be a little bit more about my background and my creative journey to be an artist here in Austin. I'm not going to focus as much on my art currently, but more so my styles that have kind of shifted and ebbed and flowed throughout the years. Also going to touch on my identity exploration, inspirations, and why I create, and then a really important show this past year, which was my first group show called Rituals. So I'll quickly go through my background here. I grew up on the East Coast in Clarksville, Maryland. I'm adopted from South Korea, and I'm the youngest of six. My family is really warm and loving, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't have them. So very much love them so much. I have a BFA from University of Delaware in graphic design and a master's in art therapy focused in trauma and special needs populations. In 2018, I opened my private practice where I facilitated art therapy and Reiki, which is an energy healing process. And due to the pandemic in 2020, I had to shut down and really started this process of creative healing. It gave me a chance to move forward and heal, and started my process to get me to Austin. I'm going to quickly go through some of my older pieces here. I think it's interesting, at least in my opinion, to see where I came from and where I am now. I started creating very young, started with watercolor classes and always doodled. I think my family can attest that I had journals and journals of just scribbles and wanted to just release something, but watercolor was my really grounding medium from a young age. As I moved through college and through grad school, some themes really emerged for me. A lot of shapes, a lot of layering, a lot of compartments. As you can see, my love for circles really emerged. But I see more of maybe a subconscious, playful side coming out through my pieces. In 2018, I was starting my private practice. Reiki became a big part of my daily practice, and energy was just something that really needed to be exerted from me. And so I saw a shift specifically in this piece where the movement became more alive. Jumping a little forward, I took the time during the first part of COVID and asked myself, when do you get this time to really work on your own mental health and work on past traumas? And so my body was ready, my mind was ready. And I took a 5-week intensive created by myself to really process my adoption and start my discovery of identity. I can go into that a lot more in depth with anyone who wants to chat about that more later, but wanted to just touch on that because it was a really pivotal point where within meditation and art making and research, I came to the point that I needed to get out of New York, and move to a new place that had nature and start a new chapter. As I got to Austin, it became a really pivotal moment for me to really explore. I brought all my art materials, and during isolation, I started to just paint constantly. It was a time for me to just try different technique, colors, layering, and really channel some of the things that I was processing previously in the earlier months. This piece stood out to me, and one that I was making, where it was not so much a rigid theme of shapes and edges. It was more fluid, although still contained and kind of maybe still chaotic a little bit, but was able to have a little bit more fluidity. During this time, I always turn back to my watercolors, which is, during when you get stuck, it's where I gravitate towards. And so really focused on line, movement, the mind and body, how it connects and how it works together. And as you can see here, as I continued with watercolor, maybe playing a little bit with control and lack of control, seeing how organic shapes really started to form with the nature theme starting to emerge. Later in the summer, preparing for my first East application, I began to work a little bigger, to do more process of layering, more organic lines and forms, still keeping nature as a big focal point. These two pieces were ones that I really felt were significant for displaying my love for nature and my inspiration to water and landscape. Always falling back to watercolor, of course. You can see the shift in my line work, no focal point, no end or start to it. I thought it was significant to see that there. Up to Rituals is this show that I had in May. It was my first group show. I was really excited. And it was up to me to interpret how I wanted to convey rituals. And I chose to pay homage to my roots, which were both Irish and Korean, and how they can kind of connect where the lines could completely meld together or conflict in some way. And I used thread as a metaphor to not only connect the two colors together and the line work together, but also to show as a sign of like really healing and mending a wound. The healing really started afterwards. And it was mainly when I shared my story with the public. Sharing it with people really helped the healing process. And I not only had my partner and friends, but was lucky to have my sisters come and see the work in person and be there, and have that support was really important to my creative process. So more recent works, I'm really focused on the line work, not so much being rigid, but really working with organic flow and working with continued nature themes. I take pride in a lot of my paintings really not looking similar at all, and having them continue to have the same movement in them, but in different ways, and convey different emotions and themes. As I revert back to watercolor, you can see another shift here where movement is really prominent, and I continue my journey with my process and creative evolution. I quickly just want to show you all the pieces in one slide together because I think it really shows a shift in the movement. I want to thank Diane and Sophia and Women in Their Work for giving me the opportunity to show some of my pieces, and I hope to get to know all the members soon. Here's my email if you want to connect, I would love to, and my website there. East is coming up, so my studio is located at Broad Studios in Springdale General, and I'm number 413, and I have a lot of goodies that I'll be having for the 2 weekends. So I hope to see everyone out there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ani.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Amanda Witucki.
Hey y'all, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, hi, I'm Amanda Witucki. I also go by the paper committee, and I've been working with paper for probably the last 10 years, but specifically moved into origami and paper pleating in 2018. I was doing research for a project and I came across this shape, which kind of is like the shape that changed my life because I've been working with it ever since then. It's got a lot of potential. I realized once I glued them together, they became this like topographic, strange landscape. So my very first installation using this technique was in 2018. And here I was really just trying to master how to make it and like what works best with installation, what kinds of paper. And since then, in doing research to kind of perfect it, I've come across a lot of different paper companies and had access to new colors. And since then, color has really become the focus to what I do. I try to tell stories through color. I want to like evoke an emotion or create an experience through color. So here are some installations that I've done. These are all in different people's homes. And so this is like a great way of showing how I like to use color. I like to take traditionally beautiful colors and mix them with like kind of ugly colors, like a weird drab olive green mixed with like soft shades of pink. I just think it's so beautiful. And last year I had a solo show called Colors of the Season, Stories of My Mother's Life. So I took memories from my mom and translated them into a color palette. And it's kind of interesting. It's people don't normally associate memories with certain colors, kind of like how we don't really realize that we dream in color until we're really taking time to look at it. So it was fun to take a color and extract from that like an entire palette. So this piece is based off of like a really ugly green that my mom said was her father's car and she hated it. And I think that I would have loved that green. So I created like a very friendly palette to honor that. So here are a few more pieces. They all told different stories. One was about when she first met my father, and one was about my grandmother that I had never met, and just different stories. So with that, yeah, I've always tried to like evoke different feelings and things like that. These are pieces from the past year, trying to incorporate new elements like painted stripes and different things to create a little bit more complex of a composition. And I've recently started introducing new shapes like triangles. I really love on the left, the very like faceted. It's similar to my original design with a very topographic landscape look, but it's just very fun to make. So I really enjoy it. Here are some other pieces from this year and some installations. So the one on the left was an installation I did last year, and the one on the right is a piece that was translated, kind of taking the original design and making it more palatable for someone's home, so it's not too intense. And I made 3 of those like lamp fixtures. So trying to also incorporate like functionality into the art. The one on the right is actually my installation from the Austin studio tour last year. It was loosely based off of pasta shapes. So you can see like farfalle and spaghetti and lasagna. Like I just like to do kind of fun, silly things sometimes. So what's going on right now is I'm working on an installation called Here Today, Gone Tomorrow, and it's a home that will be a stop on the Austin studio tour. The house is going to be demolished at the end of the year, so it's empty now. And in its interim, they the developers hired like 35 or so artists to have like complete carte blanche to create whatever they would like on the inside and outside. There are muralists. There's like a yarn bomber. And then I have the bathroom. So I wanted to create a space that was like very joyous and stimulating and kind of like taking the energy that had been there, which like it was kind of like a problematic house. I guess the people that lived there beforehand, they lived there rent free for 2 years. So some of the neighbors have like come around and talked about it. And I guess it was like kind of a troubled house. So I feel like there was a lot of probably negative energy there. And so I kind of looked at this project as a way to like cleanse the house through color. So my goal is I create a room that's like full of joy. People come in, they experience that joy, and that energy kind of like dissipates into the house, kind of like cleansing the area before it's demolished and they build something new. So here's a look at the place when it first started off. It's really rough. They spray painted everything inside and out, just white. So it gave us like a blank canvas to work off of. So I took like a very pastel color palette. I wanted everything to feel kind of like candy. So I started by painting the tiles, and it looks really rough. And I wanted to embrace kind of the dilapidated nature of the house, kind of like acknowledging what's really going on, but also trying to impart some sort of beauty. And yeah, so this is, I started adding all of these paper squares that were in the same size as the tiles. So it's like somewhere around 1,500 squares of paper. And you can see on this window here, someone is spray painting on the back. There's a mural on the back of the house. So that's what that is. So I painted the bathtub and the sink and the toilet. Those fixtures had to stay there. So I didn't want to just like ignore them, but I just wanted to paint them this kind of neutral blue. So they're really not like a focal point, but they're just kind of there. And so for the ceiling installation, it's kind of a two-part thing. So the purpose of this room is to kind of cleanse what had happened in the house before, but it was also, it originally started as like a way for me to process the anxiety that I've been feeling. I've just like been struggling lately. The past 6 months, something kind of switched in my brain, and I've like had anxiety for the first time in my life. And so what I wanted to do was like create a room that can be seen as like a peaceful place. So the ceiling is kind of like showing my mind, kind of like the chaos and like literally like the paper scraps and things from the past and disorganized mess, and then showing how that can exist with like the structure and order that's around it. And it's also kind of a nod, if you look at the ceiling and knowing that this place will be demolished in a few months, it's kind of like an ironic twist of like, this is what it's going to look like in a few months. So it's also like trying to just acknowledge the chaos that's there and not cover it up, you know, kind of like honoring that it exists, but then trying to move on with healing. I also had to incorporate my traditional like signature style origami, just in case there were people who had not seen my work before. I always have to kind of represent. Plus it looks a little bit like bubbles in the bathtub. So I put that in the bathtub, kind of like coming onto the toilet and the sink. And so I wanted to make a focal point for this area here. And I just wanted something simple, something that has beautiful colors. It brings you in. And yeah, this is actually like the one piece that's for sale. Everything else is just meant to be an experiential element, but this is a removable canvas. So this is the final look. It is just a bathroom. So it's a little BB room, and you walk in and close the door behind you, and you're just surrounded by color and sort of like chaos above and below. Here's another angle. And then I have a movie where you can see how it is like walking in. So the ground now has AstroTurf on it, and I have a photo of that, so it's totally finished. There's also, I have fans going to make the paper move. I wanted it to feel like an ocean of color, kind of like sparkling around you, but it doesn't quite have that effect. So I think I might just take the fans out because it's a small space and they do take up some space with their cords and things. So yeah, here's the final thing with the AstroTurf. I think it's great. It's just its own little environment. So yeah, I really hope that people come in and they experience joy, and that energy kind of like adds to the whole experience with it. And everyone that's working on this project has been really awesome. They've taken really good care of us. And so here's where I'm going to be at during the studio tour. That installation I was talking about is stop number 489. I will be at stop number 405, which is at the Papercraft Pantry in at Springdale General. I'll be there with my paintings, but then I've also got a few other pieces at an interior design firm, which is stop 463. And all of these are going to be during East. And these two stops are like very, very close to each other. I think they're like a half a mile away. So you can maybe see them both at the same time. Yeah, but that's it.
Thanks so much. So next up, we have Alicia Philley.
Hello. Okay, there. Thanks, Sophia. So I am outdoors on my phone and am not as tech savvy as being able to do all the things on my phone. So I'm just going to show you this one slide, or Sophia is, and then I'm going to walk around and show you my latest work, which is a large-scale installation that's outdoors. So I'm Alicia Philley, and I am an abstract painter, and I've jumped into the 3D world with this exhibition called The Seeds We Plant. And it is a site-specific 70 pieces of art hanging from trees, coming up from the ground along a trail called the Woodland Trail at the Wildflower Center. And all I can say is it went up 3 weeks ago, and I still feel a little out of body that it's happened and it's real, and I'm just thrilled to be able to share it with everyone. And yes, and we will be participating in West, so you'll have chances during those weekends to come out here if you want. All right, I think you can switch it to my view now if you want. Okay, hi everyone. So again, my name is Alicia Philley, and I'm gonna just kind of start with a few descriptions of the work and what I use. But mostly I'm gonna flip the image around and just kind of walk around and show you pieces as I talk about why I created this installation. So my art practice is very much about differentiating between the experiences of looking versus seeing. And with that, I'm going to try to flip my screen. So give me a second. I've already tapped one too many things. Okay, back to my screen view. And there we go. Cool. So to give an example here, the opening of this trail is filled with brightly painted artwork, which I am almost at. And as you walk toward the trail, you're going to easily notice these pieces. Colors jump out at you, and they're kind of hard to miss. And so, yeah, people are going to be aware of that, and then they're probably going to just keep on walking. And sorry, losing my thought here. So, and then there's going to be other artworks that maybe have a little less vibrancy and don't stand out as much. Or it might even just be the backside of the piece that you just walked by. And so, yeah, like here's one, or it might just be really high up. And so these don't instantly draw your attention. Like you have to be actively looking for them and work a little harder to notice them. So what's interesting to me is that when you do see them, maybe after this searching around, you have an experience of finding something, seeing something unexpected, and that can give you that little endorphin rush that we all love and is a wonderful positive feedback. And those feelings draw you into the experience of looking with intention. And the more you do that, and the more of this feedback that you get of, oh, I found a new one. Oh, oh, look at that. I didn't see that before. You start to experience what it means to not just pass through the world, but to actually take it in and process it and be present with it. And so one other kind of physical aspect of the work and my intention for the show is that I use a lot of color changing paints, so iridescent, metallic, reflective paints. And so an example of what that can give you is that yesterday I was here, I spent the whole day here, I met some people and had a photographer come out. And so it was the first time since I'd installed the work that I had spent an entire day looking at it. And I was actually surprised and had my own experience of looking and then seeing something new and getting that excitement. And, this is after I worked on this, all year and stared at it more than anyone ever will. And so what was happening was there was this one piece, it was very deep red, and it it was like getting darker in the day, and so it didn't stand out a whole lot, but at a certain moment the light hit it and it just started to glow this like golden yellow orange. And I mean, it was bright, like almost like when your headlights hit that reflective paint on a sign or on the road. And then cutting through that was the shadow, a shape of a branch and a leaf. And those, the wind was slightly blowing. And so you just got this mild sway of the leaf. And I just stared at it and thought, oh my God, I didn't expect that. And so, I think that when we can sit with something and allow it to speak to us, and it can be an object or it can be, that butterfly that just flew over my head, we get to witness something, and it can not only be witnessing that thing transforming, but it can transform us as well. So I want to add, you don't have to spend the entire day out here to enjoy the show. But, I just wanted to make that point that, when we experience something that we weren't expecting, like a physical object changing color, the world can have a sense of lacking that sort of permanence that we, I think, attach to it. And to me, that's what magic is like. That's what it feels like. And even if we understand, like, oh, that's a trick of the light, there's something in us that's still, I don't know, it taps into like those childlike feelings of magic is happening all around us. So this gets me to the kind of non-physical aspects of the work, the concept and intention. And so I'm going to back up now and just give you a little history. I'll try to go quick. So I was living in New York when the 9/11 attacks happened. And like most people at that time, I went through a really long period of upheaval, life changes, grief, anger, confusion, questioning the purpose of everything. And I was also laid off from my job, like a lot of people. So I had all this time to just be and deal with what I was going through. And yeah, it was a strange time. And so during all of this, I was going to Central Park a lot and just walking around. It was a way to get out of my apartment and to be outdoors, but it was also the middle of winter and I could be very alone out there because it's freezing and a lot of people aren't just going there for fun when you have to walk through it every day just to get home. So while I was having this time of walking around the park, I experienced outdoor temporary installation of this like aluminum looking metallic tree thing that was just like one day someone was out there building it. And I was just fascinated that this was happening and that there were all these trees surrounding it. And I started going back every day and just kind of hanging out with it. And then over time, spring came. And I watched as the leaves on the trees that were surrounding it started to change what I saw. And it was just, it was so simple and so profound. And I realized later that I was so completely absorbed in looking at this and not thinking about anything else that it actually really shocked me when one day I couldn't see it because the leaves had like burst into their full size. Like I wasn't expecting that, even though I absolutely knew that would happen because leaves grow. And so, you know, to me, that was a real awakening to what being outdoors and to what art can add to our experiences when we're outside. And it was actually a huge turning point where I decided that if I could have this experience then and have this healing, then it made sense to me that art could be the purpose for me, and it could, making art actually had a lot of value. And so I decided to go back to art school. And 2 years later, I was able to experience another outdoor installation in Central Park in the middle of winter, and it was much bigger. And some of you may have heard of it. It was the Gates by Christo and Jean-Claude, orange fabric swaying from these steel structures that were put up along every single path that they could possibly fit it onto. And you know, this is a 2.5 mile park, so it was massive and beautiful and strange. And I went out there as much as I could. It was up for about 2.5 or 3 months in the middle of winter, and it just white snow and orange fabric. And the big difference this time was that hundreds of thousands of people came out to see it, and you know, traveled from all over the world, but also just New Yorkers going here and communing and laughing and enjoying themselves. And it felt like a moment of connection that we all needed. And it really just put deeper into me that I one day wanted to make something outdoors. But you know, fast forward 20 years and I'm a painter and making outdoor art, I, you know, just was not finding the way to do that. And so, but several things happened over these past 2 years that kind of reopened that door for me. And so, you know, the first thing was what we all experienced, which was the pandemic and being, you know, locked down and separated from each other and forced to isolate. And you know, it brought up all of that fear and grief and anxiety and loss that I hadn't felt since 9/11. And I started to remember how much those outdoor artworks had helped me. And I took advantage of some of that time at home to just play. And I made a front yard piece out of fabric and yarn. And you can see that on my website. It was part of the studio tours when they were all online or outdoors 2 years ago. And not completely separated from my practice. It was about color, but you know, no paint except for some spray paint on logs that were a tree that had been cut down in my yard. And but it did what I wanted. It got me outside. It put me in this world of beautiful color. And all of a sudden people were showing up and hanging out in my front yard and at a safe distance talking, and neighbors were stopping by who I didn't know to say, oh, this is so cool, what is this? And it felt like community formed around it. And I know it gave something to those people, but it gave way more to me. And Not that I only do it for myself, but it felt like such an amazing thing to help myself and at the same time give something to other people. And so having the opportunity to make this work for the Wildflower Center is just, it's a gift to me. And I want it to be also a gift to the people who get to come out here. You know, the works are made on wood, and if you know how I paint, I've been painting on wood panels, and these shapes were things that I created just spending time out here, and they're abstract, but I think they're connected to all the nature that they're in. And so, you know, what I hope to give out of this exhibition is that when we're able to be present and be around people and experience something unexpected, that it can be part of our healing and it can help us move out of trauma. And we have so many opportunities right now to learn new ways to think about the world. You know, I feel like I learned so much about what systemic racism has been doing to our culture and climate crisis. Oh, and there's kids walking by. And the healthcare crisis, and just, you know, all these things that are dividing us. And I really believe that the more that we can go outside and look at something that feels a little magical, take a breath together, that those are some of the ways that, you know, we can come back together. And, you know, I'm certainly not going to solve all our problems, but I think that when each of us does something positive with what we love to do and shares it, that's how we get back onto the right path. The
Hey,
title
Alicia,
is,
I'm
oh
gonna
yeah, I'm
stop
sorry,
you.
did I go over?
Yeah, we have one more presentation.
Yeah, okay.
But we'll
Well,
circle
thank you
back.
so
Thank you
much.
so
Yes.
much.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. And yeah, all right. I don't know if okay, good. You took it back. All right. Thanks, Diane.
Yeah. And next up, we have Rosibel Ramirez, our Houston artist for the day.
Yes, hello, can you hear me well? Get the volume up. Hi, hello, and well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for connecting today. Welcome to my studio. I'm not in Austin, I'm in Houston, and well, I'm thrilled and honored to be here today with this talented artist, sharing some of my glass and photography artwork. Let me share here the screen. I'm sorry here. Slideshow. Okay. I'm gonna try to compress everything, you know, to not, you know, for the time, but well, this is my name is Rosibel Ramirez. That's my social media, my website, and you are welcome to DM, you know, send me a text message whenever you want to come to Houston and visit my studio. I actually just moved recently to this place, and it's very nice. It's close to the museum district, and I'll be very happy to see you here. Well, in my practice, I have used several media to approach my inspiration, which is also diverse. And I'm fortunate to say that art has been in every stage of my life. It is more than what I do, is my way of living and who I am. As a child, I had a strong influence from my mother and grandfather, both artists. And when I moved to this country 20 years, not 20 years, actually it's over 30, but I was in my 20s and I was already married. I faced many challenges, including a new language. And thanks to my family, the language of art is up to date my first language. See here is, well, working with glass in the last 7 years is like love at first sight. Glass is a medium that allowed me to explore colors, the use of heat power and light as part of my artwork, and let my unconscious express itself, creating contemporary art. And sometimes when I need to take a break, I just switch to create some jewelry and with glass and silver. As per my photography practice, this is something that I always had as a passion for. During the pandemic, I decided to get my certificate in digital photography. So I'm also working on the genre of fine art photography, incorporating that as part of my practice. I found my inspiration in many things that impact me, like womanhood, family, identity, communication, and memories of places that I have been, where I've lived before. Okay, this is some of my work. Reading Between the Lines series is about communication and the importance of keeping the rhythm in our communication with others, to understand them and to be understood. Something interesting about art is that the viewer can make their interpretation. In this case, some people have told me, for example, this represents the ocean. And for others, it means the wall on the border. And for me, every viewer is correct, right? Let's see here. The next is, this one here is the Journey series. It was, I was the first one in my family to leave Venezuela. I'm from Venezuela. When no one ever thought about emigrating, at least in my family. And nowadays, my family is all over 4 different continents. So this body of work is more organic and take nature into consideration as a comfort zone in our journey. And going into this one, the Reality Behind the Glass series. This one, I made it during the pandemic, and I used glass glass artwork that was already finished. And I used that as a diffuser or filter to take my photograph. For me, as for many others also, everything was seen behind a glass, behind a window, behind a monitor, a phone, or a TV. And the reality was so fretful that even breathing around others was unbearable. I worked with what I had in my home studio, and I took photographs of the people I encountered. It was like, for me, it was like keeping a record during that time, of the people I was seeing. And there's another work, there are several pictures like this, working, with some of the glass artwork that was already done. And this one is my last series, which is a work in progress that I haven't shown yet. The name is A Woman in This World. where I emphasize working women, the long day they have from dawn to dusk, a job that doesn't end after they get home, and being a woman in this world of men. I like to use natural light and catch the perfect moment for a portrait that speaks for itself. Well, thank you. And that's my information again.
Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. That was awesome. All of your presentations were super great. Got a lot of information about who you are as an artist and how you've grown. I'm gonna be opening up the floor to questions. If you all have any questions of each other, or if anybody wants to type a question, I will ask it for you.
This isn't really a question, it's more of a comment to Alicia. Did you mention how many pieces are installed?
Yeah, I don't know if I got to that. There's 70.
Yeah, I just wanted people to know that. That's incredible.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to have that kind of a body of work. Yeah, that's insane. If I can get 15, I'm proud of myself. So well done on that. And also, I've also wanted to do outdoor kind of sculptures, and I'm unsure of how to be able to do that. How would I translate my work into something that can withstand weather? And I followed your work for a while because I know with your paintings, you work with like painter's tape to kind of add and remove things. And it took me a second. I didn't realize you were that person when I was seeing these sculptures. And now it's like, you did such a great job of translating and staying true to your voice and then still making something that can be outside. So great job all around on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So one of the things that struck me about all of the artists who presented is how much color plays into our practice and, what we make and how we make it, but also the intention and concept. And yeah, I'd just be curious to hear from anyone who'd like to comment, like, was that something you discovered about yourself early on, or was it one of those at a certain point you realized, oh, I spend a lot of time thinking about color? Like, I'm always curious to know how other color artists got to that understanding and place in their work.
I'll comment quickly about, I feel like living in New York, I don't know if you have the same experience, Alicia, but for me, I wear a ton of black. And it's kind of like all I own. And so I feel like I don't necessarily wear color. And so translating that onto canvas has been a really important thing because I do see and love color so much. And it's shifted from bright neon colors to more muted and calming, soothing colors. So I've seen the evolution kind of evolve, but color is really important to me.
Yeah. No, I definitely wore a lot of black, but I've been in Austin for almost 15 years. So
Okay.
I've stepped away from it most of the time.
I can comment on color. It's for me, the love of color started from a young age. I remember when I was in first grade, Crayola crayons did their like new color series. That's when we got Purple Mountains Majesty, Robin's Egg Blue. And I remember feeling,
yes.
I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, we have 64 options. Then it was like 96. And I was like, these are all things that it's like my heart knew they existed, but I never could see it in our classic 12 pack of crayons. And ever since then, I've been very specific about describing what color I like, oh, it's peanut butter brown. What a wonderful color.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've always just been very like, I don't think I can see more of a spectrum of colors than other people, obviously, but I I wish I could, but I just feel like it's very precise. I'm always trying to get like, can you see exactly what I'm seeing? How can I whittle it down and make it more exact? Yeah.
Actually, there is research into that, and there are people who can see finer detail of color than others. And I feel like that's probably most visual artists who work with color. Because I will describe something as like a deep purpley red with a hint of blue, and my husband will say, "You mean that red one?" And he really doesn't see like a difference. So yeah, like it's something about the number of cones in our retinas, or I used to, yeah, I'm kind of a color nerd and I love the science of it too. So
Yeah, yeah.
Amanda, I had a question for you. The bathroom that you're working on, or you already finished, it is like a kid walking in the candy store. It's like, so it does allude, I can't wait to go. But I'm curious, with your anxiety that's come up recently, my inner
Yeah.
art therapist is coming out, and like, was the tiling that you did with all the 1500 note and the organization of it all and putting it up, did that help your anxiety or subdue it a little bit? I imagine it did, just from the repetitive nature of it, but curious your thoughts.
Yeah, honestly, I think a lot of stuff came up at once. You know, I think everything's kind of multifactorial, but right before I started this installation, I started kind of saying out loud to like my family, like, I've been struggling. This is something that's going on. I don't feel safe. There's just like a lot of TV shows that I've watched. I try not to watch them. And now it's like, I just don't feel safe. That was my concern. And it was like a new form of anxiety that I couldn't really help because there was no way to make the world safe. So I went into this project like very intentional, like this is going to be a labor of love of cutting out these squares, laying out each color in a strategic way, putting the pins up or gluing them up. And I wanted everything to be a process. And for the focal point, that was originally going to be like a mandala, because I thought that would be very therapeutic to create a mandala, but just because of time constraints, I couldn't honor it. You know, I wasn't taking my time and making something really elaborate because I just ran out of time. But honestly, since I've created this room, I'm not struggling in the same way with that anxiety. And I think it was because I like talked about it and like tried to make things intentional. I also recharged my rose quartz by the full moon in the early October.
Perfect.
Yeah,
well,
so I've been doing a lot better. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
and I'm curious, with Rosibel, I mean, the glass pieces with the portraits, I mean, it's just such a perfect, you know, metaphor for how we had to live for so long. And I know you were working with glass before, but when did you start with glass? Because that wasn't the beginning of your art process, right?
No, I did work, you know, with, I have, like I said, you know, I use many media, you know, different, from bronze, stone carving, welding, you know, like metal. It's always three-dimensional, but I don't know, sometimes, you know, events happens, you know, and I just reinvented myself, getting into new experiences, you know, through art. Like,
Yep.
for example, I love to do stone carving, and I have, you know, some piece that I really, the good thing is that I enjoy everything that I've done, you know. But like, for example, like I said, you know, when I had, I was doing stone carving, I had my a carpal tunnel surgery in both hands. And one thing that I can't do anymore is doing stone carving because of the power tools, you know, that involve.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's very physical. Some of the things that I have done, you know, like oversized life, you know, bronzes, life-size bronzes, and, you know, carrying things, carrying the stones. So there are things that I cannot do, you know. I did it when I was 20, but not right now. And so I just reinvented myself, you know. I never stopped doing art. And glass, actually I did, when you mentioned the color, you know, I love colors, you know. I'm Latina, and I'm from Venezuela. I was born and raised there, you know, and until I came here, and we use a lot of colors, you know. And glass, just, you know, I just enjoy it so much. All the colors and things. Let me show you something that I have here in my studio, you know, like, for example, that one. the use of the light. That's one of the pieces that
Yeah.
I like, and so yeah, so I have, yeah, that's the studio right now. So initially was, like more dark colors, because bronze is dark, and stone carving, I use alabaster and marble, and was more like into the whites and pink, colors. But now it's like an explosion of colors, I can use anyone, all of it. And I really enjoy it, and I like it.
It's really beautiful, and you can get that luminescence, and very magical.
Yeah, I started, like with glass, like 7 years ago, and it was in that transition, of changing from one media to another, readjusting,
I know about that.
Alicia, I'm curious how you get the shapes that you get, and how do you plan it that way? Is it just like you're moving? What tool even gets those shapes in the middle out? I don't.
Yeah, sure.
Curious.
So everything, the final step before I get the three-dimensional piece is translating my sketches or drawings into Illustrator, and then I have them all CNC cut. And in the past, I've worked with a couple who would, like fully finish everything out, and then it just comes to me ready to paint on. And I decided with these, because there were so many of them, but also wanting to be more engaged with the shapes themselves, I just had them cut, and then I assembled and did all the sanding and finishing out, which I learned a lot, and I learned maybe I don't have to do that all the time. So so I mean, it's a drawing that gets cut out in wood, and it's I still am like, this is probably the coolest thing I've discovered since I left art school, because it's funny to me like how long it takes me to make the steps to go from like painting on canvas to this, like 20 years, but it makes sense to me because I really dig deeply into the detail, and wanting to understand every step of it. And so it takes a while for me to feel like I've mastered something, and then maybe I'm going to try to add something in.
And I wanted to ask you something. Are you still doing the therapy, art therapy, or whenever you move from New York, already just
Unfortunately, right now I am not. I hope to get back into it at least part-time. Texas doesn't have a license for art therapy, and so I would have to take some classes and sit for my LPC, and I just haven't invested the money and time into that. Just the creative journey has been something that has been really a pivotal thing for me right now, and just what I want to focus on. But I would love to eventually get back to it for sure.
I wonder if there's a way around that where you could do some sort of like almost like a life coach, where maybe you don't need a license for that, but you're still using your skills. I don't know if you'd be interested in that.
Yeah. Well, let me, I really, I'm sorry to jump in, but I was, I admire that you went through, your master's to do that, and being aware of the licenses and all that, because physical therapy, art therapy is something that I think is very important, but it's also need to be taken, very seriously, because it's about how the well-being of a person, and you don't know, how people can react. I mean, if you don't have the experience with that, never putting out your feelings, so
absolutely.
Really, I really admire you for that.
Oh, thank you.
And I hope you get your lessons.
Thank you. It's definitely a journey that, working with trauma for so long, you kind of see the implications that come with it, and crisis intervention is a real thing. And most people have had traumas in their life, and so it's prevalent, and it's not just in New York, it's everywhere. So I hope that I can get back to it because, I think that art is inherently a beautiful and therapeutic method, and everyone should do it. So if they want to. I don't know, no pressure.
I just want to add that Linda Masters said amazing work from everyone. So happy to have experienced these amazing works. All the very best to all. And Lisa Alley says, I love how y'all all balance very natural palettes and neutrals with vibrant pops and saturation. Very fun and calming in equal parts.
Nice. I feel very seen by that comment.
Yeah.
So good to hear. I think that we are at a stopping point now, you guys. So I just want to thank you all so much again for participating in Fresh in the Studio. I know that you all have some events going on at East and West. So we're super excited for all of that. We have Janelle as far as a show. It could only be lived up at the gallery right now. So everyone is welcome to come in and investigate that a little bit more. So yeah, thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you for everybody who tuned in.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for showing up and listening to us talk. And thank you, Diane, and Women in Their Work. Appreciate
Thank
this time.
you.
Mhm.
Thanks, y'all. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.